Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Inside Groove right here on Northwest Access TV. I am Nick Mumley, and I'll be your host tonight. Usually I have Dustin Tanner right over there to my left, but he is out tonight with a personal matter, so we'll be looking forward to seeing Dustin back in the coming weeks here. But we got a lot of stuff to get to tonight. There's a lot going on this weekend in NASCAR. Of course, the Indy 500 or the Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis was rained out on Saturday and Sunday. So both those races came in on Monday today, and we saw some pretty good action. Justin Allgaier won for the Xfinity Series, and Brad Keselowski took home his second win in a row and first win ever for Roger Penske in the Brickyard 400. Also today, we'll be talking about Furniture Row Racing. They announced Wednesday that they're shutting down after 2018. They won't be fielding a car in 2019. Remember, this is the team that had the championship last year with Martin Truex Jr. So we're going to be getting into the thoughts and reaction on that as the night goes on, and the playoffs are officially set here in the NASCAR Cup Series. The only playoffs still yet to be set are the Xfinity Series playoffs, and we will be getting to those after Las Vegas next week, but we'll take a deep dive into the playoffs here in the Cup Series and take a look and give some predictions maybe as we move on there. And the IndyCar Series, they are headed to Sonoma for their final race of the season. Championship coming up Sunday night at 6:30 on NBCSN. It's going to be a great battle, a double points race, and Scott Dixon currently has that points lead by 29 points. We'll get to that later on in the show, but first let's get started here on some Indianapolis talk here. Of action-packed day of racing today for sure, as we saw the Xfinity Series race rained out on Saturday. The Cup race rained out on Sunday due to the remnants of the tropical storm that had been sitting over the central U.S. over the weekend. So both races run today. Xfinity race started at 10, Cup race started at 2. So if you weren't working, you had a full day of NASCAR action. And we'll start off here with the Xfinity Series race. Let's take a look at the results from that one. Justin Allgaier winning again. That's his fifth win of 2018. Tyler Reddick finishing second, Ryan Blaney third, Chase Elliott fourth, and Daniel Hemrick coming home fifth. This was a really good race to watch. A lot of good action. Of course, this was the second year that the Xfinity Series has been using the restrictor plates at Indianapolis, and it made for some good racing. And I like the use of the restrictor plates at Indianapolis for these Xfinity Series cars, because hey, let's face it, this is a really tough track for these young drivers. This is one of the toughest tracks you'll go to on the Xfinity schedule. They didn't go to it for years and years because it was so tough. You know, this kind of levels the playing field a little bit for those younger drivers and focuses it, and it helps them learn the track, learn the draft, and it creates for some great racing too, which is what the Xfinity Series needs. Now, Justin Allgaier, we talked about it. He now has 5 wins. He's taken a huge lead in the in the point standings with one race to go before the playoffs. Let's take a look at those Xfinity Series points with one race to go. Allgaier, this was a 10-15 point battle 3-4 weeks ago. And Allgaier's kind of just come in here, won 2 of the last 3 races and run away with the show. Cole Custer's now all the way back, 49 points behind. Christopher Bell, 52 back. Hemrick, 55. And Elliott Sadler, who was involved in an accident today at Indianapolis, dropped back. He's now 69 points behind Allgaier for that top spot, pretty much out of the running for the regular season championship. So Allgaier, unless he wrecks next weekend at Las Vegas, he should wrap up the regular season title, which, that's good to see for him. And Allgaier, he's a guy that deserves this. I really like what Justin Allgaier brings to the table because, he has kind of been one of those guys that's gone kind of under the radar throughout his whole career. We've seen, his struggles in Cup. You'd think that he would have gotten a shot at Penske when he first started way back. He won 3 races in the Busch Series back in the early 2010s for Penske Racing, and a lot of people forget about those days with Allgaier. He was slated to take over for Ryan Newman when Newman left that 12 car back in 2010. But Then Penske brought in Brad Keselowski, and obviously that was a good choice for them because Keselowski's brought them 26 wins and a championship. But Allgaier kind of lost out on that ride. He went and, went to some back markers for a couple of years, but never really realized that potential that a lot of people saw in him. Dale Jr. gave him a shot in 2016. Since then, he has finished in the top 3 in points all 3 years with Dale Jr. He's won 7 races with Dale Jr., and including 5 this year now. He's really kind of that guy that never really got that big shot in the Cup Series that I think he really deserves because, honestly, Allgaier all along has really been a good prospect. And, he's only 32 years old. He brings sponsorship with him. I think that he should be looking at a Cup ride. And what I really love the most about Justin Allgaier is, this is a big win for him today because, he's a Midwest guy. He's from Illinois, just about 3 hours away from the track. In a very emotional post-race interview today because he talked about coming to Indianapolis with his dad and how much that meant to him growing up. And now to win there is a huge moment for him. I think that that's huge for Indianapolis as they try to, rejuvenate things. This is a track that, 25 years ago when they first started, they were filling up. All 250,000 people were showing up for the race. The track was full. Now the Cup Series race back in 2016, only 50,000 people showed up. So Indianapolis is in need of a rejuvenation. Justin Allgaier's win today, while it was just in the Xfinity Series, I think it's a bigger deal than people might think because Midwest, when you get those Midwestern drivers to win at Indianapolis, and the fans see how big of a deal that winning at that track is for them, I think that really puts people in the seats because everybody just loves to see it. I think look back at Jeff Gordon and Tony Stewart back in the day when these guys won at this track that they grew up attending. I think that this was just the biggest moment of their careers. You saw, if you watched the broadcast today, Tony Stewart was on talking about just how much it meant to him to win at the Brickyard, not only once, but twice. For Justin Allgaier to get to do that, I think is huge for him, and I think it's huge for the sport. And another thing I love about Justin Allgaier is that he's one of those guys that's not going to say a whole lot. He's just going to go do his job. He's going to do it really well, and he's going to win races for you. He's come out now, won 5 races this year, and you never see any sort of big personality from Allgaier. He just does his job, and I really like that because, it's refreshing to see you've got these personalities with Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski and Kevin Harvick just kind of running around. They all kind of go crazy sometimes with those personalities, and it gets a little bit annoying sometimes. Sometimes you just want to see a guy go and win a race and just shut up and drive and just put a good show together. And Justin Allgaier is that guy for you. You look at a guy like Martin Truex Jr. I think Allgaier has a lot of those same qualities that Martin Truex Jr. Has. And I think you look at it, if there's a team out there in NASCAR right now that's looking for the next Martin Truex Jr., the next Monster Energy Cup Series champion, you're going to find it in Justin Allgaier because he's a very similar driver to Martin Truex Jr. I think that Allgaier, while he's sitting in the Xfinity Series right now, look at Martin Truex Jr. He sat with lower competition teams for years, and as soon as he got put into that big ride in the Cup Series, he's now a champion and almost a 20-race winner. So it's a big difference, when you can see that guy who's not flashy but goes to work every day and gets the job done. I think Justin Allgaier has a big future in this sport. I think that he will be in the discussion for getting a Cup Series ride next year, which will be a whole nother conversation. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation because at this point, Allgaier is in a spot in the Xfinity Series where he's going to be making names be making a name for himself every weekend. He's going to be in position to win a championship every year that he stays with Dale Jr. And that's not a terrible spot to be in. If Justin Allgaier, if the best ride that he can get is another backmarker in the Cup Series, he knows what that's like. He's been there. He was there for 4 years with H. Scott. He never did anything notable in the Cup Series in a backmarking team, but neither did Martin Truex Jr., so that's okay. If I'm Justin Allgaier, I'm just going and, if it takes 2-3 championships to win in the Xfinity Series before I can get a top Cup ride, so be it. But if I'm Allgaier, I'm waiting for that top Cup ride to come around. I'm not jumping back to the Cup Series as quickly as possible. So for Allgaier, I think he's in a good situation right now where he is. No matter what he does, he's either going to be in a good spot in one of the top rides in the Xfinity Series or headed off to a Cup Series ride. So we'll see what happens there. On another subject here, in the Xfinity Series, we talked about the aero package that was used the second year of them doing it. They put the restrictor plates in the Xfinity Series cars, bunched everybody up, made for some really good side-by-side racing. You saw the draft in effect, and it made for some really good racing. We saw the 4-wide finish in Stage 1 with Ryan Preece and Allgaier and all those guys getting in there. That was a really good finish, and I think that it made the Xfinity Series really exciting. But you can't put this into the Cup Series. I don't think that you can put this kind of, I think putting the restrictor plates into the Cup Series ruins Daytona Talladega for it. I didn't really like what they did for the All-Star race at Charlotte. The racing, sure, it was a little bit better, but the cars went a lot slower. I think it took a lot away from it. Kyle Larson put it really well, saying, it just takes a lot out of the drivers. In the Cup Series, it's supposed to be a series where, the best driver wins, it's all about driver skill. It's all about the best team. Whoever can, tune that car to be the best car in the field and combine that with the best driver in the field, those are the teams that are going to win championships. And, we saw that going way back with Jimmy Johnson winning 5 in a row there. I think that Johnson, that was, a lot of people, didn't like that. But I think that's kind of the beauty of racing, is just because the goal for everybody is to dominate the sport. And I think that the more tracks that you put these restrictor plates on, and the more you bunch up the field and less control and of the results of the race you give to the drivers, it makes the sport easier. I am absolutely against anything that is going to make NASCAR racing easier for the drivers, because at the end of the day, that puts a bad product on TV, and for the people in the stands, that's the last thing NASCAR needs right now. You want to see these drivers being given the absolute toughest test week in and week out. We see the Brickyard. Tony Stewart talks about it. You have to be perfect there. You have to put together the perfect race. You look at Matt Kenseth. He had a really good shot to win that Cup race, but he made a mistake on his pit crew, made a mistake on pit road. He finished 12th. It's a situation where you've got to, I love just seeing the difficult tracks that these guys go to. Darlington, another one. You got to put together a perfect race. Martin Truex Jr. 2 years ago blows the tire with 2 laps to go. He ran an otherwise perfect race. Lost that one because he tried to stretch it just a little bit too long. He made a mistake at the end and it cost him the race. You look at Darlington this year. Kyle Larson didn't get off pit road fast enough on that last stop. He lost the race after leading 284 laps. You need to put together a perfect race at these kind of tracks to get the win. And I think that we need more of that in NASCAR, not less of that. Restrictor plates make it. You look at Daytona, you can full on have a crash and go a lap down, go 2 laps down, come back and win the race because everybody's so bunched up. I think that as long as you stay within a lap of everybody at those big restrictor plate tracks and you stay out of the wreck, you have a chance to win. I think you put that in at the 1.5 mile tracks, which really shouldn't be around anyway. I think that just makes everything a lot tougher on everybody. I'm all for putting more control in the driver's hands. I want to see the best driver go out and showcase his skill every week. I want to see the best car go out and beat everybody because he's got the best mechanics in the garage and atop the pit box every week. I don't want to see drivers in the Cup Series bunched all together with just a random draw of who's going to win. I want it to be clear who on the track is the best driver and who on the track has the best pit crew behind him. So let's get over to the Cup Series. A really good race. I thought I think that Indianapolis is on the way back. I really do. As we take a look at the results here, there was some really great racing. A couple late cautions made this thing really interesting. For a while, it looked like it was just going to be down between Hamlin and Bowyer. But a fantastic strategy call. Brad Keselowski took tires on the last caution. Hamlin and Bowyer did not. You see they fell back. Keselowski, Jones, and Harvick all came up through on the new tires. That's the kind of stuff that makes NASCAR really great, folks. I mean, you're going to see passes with 2 laps to go are a lot better than drivers running away from the field with everything. So this was really good because it brought a whole new different kind of strategy call into it late in the race, and Brad Keselowski obviously made the moves that he needed to do and simply had a faster car than Denny Hamlin. Hamlin, you got to applaud him. He did a really good job to stick with it. And he fought Brad Keselowski a lot harder than I thought he would in those closing laps, but you could tell Hamlin just didn't have the car. Indianapolis, this is the new last race of the playoffs. They changed it this year. I think it raised a little bit I think it raised the stakes a little bit going into this race because Indianapolis has just been another race in the summer for the last 4 years. The luster of this race has kind of gone away. I think this year it was back. We saw a lot of guys really going for it all. Jamie McMurray, for example, he needed a win to get in. He almost wrecked Clint Bowyer with a few laps to go because, he was trying to get to the front as quickly as he could. He was given that opportunity. He saw the lead car, and he went for it. The last few years when Indianapolis has run mid-August, when there's still plenty of time to go and make up points, I don't think you see that, and we haven't seen that. So I love the move to make it the last race before the playoffs. I think it added a heightened sense of urgency that made the racing a lot better at a track that's otherwise not really built for stock cars. But the stock cars made it work today. Let's take a look at the championship standings here going into this first race at Las Vegas. You see Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick. They have the lead in the points now because they've gotten obviously the same amount of playoff points. Martin Truex Jr. A little bit behind them, 15 back. Keselowski and Bowyer in there. Brad Keselowski 2 weeks ago was an afterthought. He wasn't going to be in this thing at all. He was just completely out of it. I think a lot of people were really shocked at how poorly that team performed this year, coming off of a year where they went to the championship for. I think that this was supposed to be the year that Brad Keselowski dominated. I think that Penske, that was kind of the thought process there. But, and thinking back to New Hampshire and Pocono, Brad Keselowski, back-to-back DNFs. Hasn't had that happen to him in a long time. At that point, I was thinking, all right, Keselowski's done. If he still makes the playoffs, he's going to be out in the first couple of rounds, and this is just going to be a failure of a year for him. But I was so wrong there because Brad Keselowski's just completely come out of nowhere and won the 2 biggest races of the entire summer. Arguably. Well, you can mix Daytona in there. Maybe if you want to count the Coke 600 as summer, that can be in there as well. But I think that Darlington and Indianapolis are 2 of the biggest races of the summer. Definitely 2 crown jewel races on the NASCAR calendar. Brad Keselowski's not only won both of those, he's won them back-to-back. And now he's got some momentum. And you look at former Brickyard winners and former Darlington winners, there's a lot of champions in there. Just ask Jeff Gordon and Jimmy Johnson and Tony Stewart and Kyle Busch, what winning at Darlington or Indianapolis can do as you get into the fall and the last couple of races of the year. There's 10 races left. Brad Keselowski's the hottest driver on the circuit right now. If he can put this together and keep this going, we could be looking at Brad Keselowski as the champion because he can do that. That's the beauty of the playoffs. 15 years ago, when there's no playoffs, you've got nothing. I mean, there's nothing going on for Brad Keselowski because he had such a bad first part of the season. Now he's peaking at the perfect time. He's figured it out. And I think Brad Keselowski is really going to be a big-time contender when it comes to the championship this year. Another big thing about the weekend was the lack of qualifying and practice, because obviously the races were washed out. All activity washed out this weekend. Cars were on track for the first time in modern NASCAR history. Cars were on the track for the first time on a Monday. And, this kind of threw in a whole different situation with things. I think it really made the races better, especially in the Cup Series, because you had guys running up front that weren't usually going to be up front. Look at Matt Kenseth. He won a stage. I mean, how that 6 team has just been nowhere the last, all season, last 3 years. That 6 team just has not been around and up front. Matt Kenseth won a stage today. William Byron ran top 5 the majority of the day. Jamie McMurray was, in contention for the win at the end there. He restarted 3rd on the last restart. He dropped to 7th at the end, but, he was right up there. This made for the lack of practice and qualifying made for a really, really good race. And it was exciting to watch. And, I think that NASCAR can take a look at this and say, okay, well, maybe we have something here. Maybe you limit practice, maybe they give you 20 minutes of practice a weekend and you put the cars out for qualifying and you're racing on Sunday. This can help out the everybody that's calling for, 2-day race weekends. You get the cars there on Saturday, give them 20 minutes of practice at 11 in the morning, put them out for qualifying after the Xfinity race them on Sunday. I can't see how that wouldn't work. I think that would be I think it evens the playing field a little bit. It makes it more difficult. Like I said, I'd love to see everything get more difficult for these drivers, because a lot of times, you see the 78, you see the 4, you see the 18. Those 3 teams make it look like it's easy for them. And at times I think it has been, because they're just so far ahead of everybody. They just go log endless laps in practice, get the cars perfect, and go out on Sunday and they have, a car that's 10 times faster than anybody else. You get these cars off the truck, they're going to be a lot closer in competition than everybody else is, because, you look at Ricky Stenhouse Jr., they're not going to be able to do as much to that car because they don't have the resources to do enough to the car that, the Kevin Harvicks, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr.'s of the world are going to be able to. So I think it levels the playing field. I think it's going to make for better racing. I think it makes it tougher for everybody else, because, you show up on Sunday, you got to figure that car out before the race gets too far out of reach. I saw Martin Truex Jr. today. He obviously lost the brake rotors, went away on that car. He lost the brakes going into turn 1, and he was done. And that's probably something that they would have figured out in practice. Then Truex would have possibly had a car that could have run away with the win. But I think that's good for NASCAR. I think it's good to let people, have problems during the race, because, it makes things, it gives the opportunity for other guys to go out there and compete and do better, because, well, the Big Three is great for NASCAR. I think that, seeing Busch, Harvick, Truex win every week is getting a little bit boring. I think that a lot of fans are saying, okay, I'm ready to see somebody else go to victory lane, and the last 2 weeks they have. And, Indianapolis was a big curveball for these guys, and it worked out pretty well. So, getting into the other stories of the last couple of weeks, because we have been off for 2 weeks, the 78 team and Furniture Row Racing, they're shutting down, and Martin Truex headed off to Joe Gibbs Racing. This is a really sad day for NASCAR, at least Wednesday was, because, this is a championship team. This is the team that won the championship in 2017, and they're now closing their doors less than a year after winning that title. This is huge. Other sports, they've got, the issues with television ratings and attendance. All sports have those issues. We'll talk about it. The NFL has them. Major League Baseball has them. Nobody's watching the NHL. The only sport that's doing better than it was 10 years ago is the NBA, and that's because the on-the-court product's just significantly better. Furniture Row Racing, this is trouble for NASCAR, because while all the other sports are having issues, with their, on-the-field stuff, nobody's having problems off the field. NASCAR is having a lot of stuff. You look at it, the commissioner of the NFL isn't having problems with DUIs and substance abuse. Roger Goodell, Rob Manfred, they didn't have to step down from their position because, they're having run-ins with the law. Major League Baseball doesn't have a sponsorship issue. The Houston Astros aren't going to shut their doors and shut down the franchise next week. They're just not. NASCAR's in a lot of trouble if this keeps happening, and it's not going to be long before something big happens here, and we see the end. And if it keeps going on like this, but without major changes, I think a sale of the sport right now is the only thing that's going to keep things going. I think that 10 more years of this, NASCAR is going to collapse. We'll still see stock car racing of some kind. We always will. I don't think that will ever stop. But I think NASCAR is very, very close to just losing everything. So let's get moving on here to the IndyCar series as they went on to Sonoma. Or as they go on to Sonoma here, they raced in Portland. They went up to the Pacific Northwest, which was pretty exciting. Let's take a look at the results from that race. Takuma Sato, his first win since 2017. That was a really, really fun race to watch. And, seeing those Indy cars go back to a track that they had gone to early in the beginnings of the sport was just so great. The reaction to that race, everybody loved it. Great finish. There was a lot going on with it. Scott Dixon obviously recovered from a lot of problems to finish fifth. Let's take a quick look at the point standings in the Xfinity series, or in the IndyCar series, with just one race to go. Alexander Rossi just 29 points out of that lead. In Sonoma coming up on Sunday is a double points race. So, cut that in half. That's more like 15 points in a regular, if it was going to be a regular season race. So there's a lot on the line here. Rossi, the rookie. Scott Dixon's been winning championships since 2003. Rossi's been in the sport for 3 years. So it really is the kid versus the veteran right here. It's going to be must-see TV coming up on Sunday. I'm very excited to watch that race. As for the Cup Series, they'll be going on to Las Vegas. What should be a really good race out there. I don't know if it will be a good race. Coming off of Indianapolis, I'd love to say that Las Vegas would be a good race to start the playoffs, but I just can't get over the fact that NASCAR's made a big mistake by putting a second Las Vegas race on the schedule. If you watched the Las Vegas race back in March, you probably fell asleep halfway through it because nothing happened. Kevin Harvick led the entire thing, won both stages in the race. Nothing happened. I don't anticipate anything to happen in this race either. We're about to go from what NASCAR could be and should be in the future with this race at Indianapolis this week to everything that's wrong with NASCAR coming up this weekend at Las Vegas. That's going to be an interesting race, but I'm not expecting a whole lot out of it, but we'll see what happens. I'll give it a chance. I'll give any NASCAR race a chance. Hopefully something good comes out of it. That's going to be all for us here tonight on the Inside Groove. I'm Nick Mumley. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week once again at 7 o'clock right here on Northwest Access TV. Good night, everybody.